Thank you, Stéphane, for your keynote talk. Stéphane is, as you can see, going to stay with us on stage for our next panel discussion, which is focused on the future of health discovery and innovation. We have a really impressive lineup of speakers for this, and each of whom is shaping the future of healthcare in their own unique way. With this, we're going to ask our earlier keynote speaker, Professor Ellen Roche, to come back and join us once again on stage. Thank you, Ellen. And we're also joined by two further panelists I'm delighted to introduce. First, we have Ines Thiele, who is Professor of Molecular Systems Physiology here at University of Galway and a pioneering researcher in computational biology who is leading efforts to improve our understanding of human health through personalized modeling approaches. Ines has multiple ERC awards, including a Starter and a Consolidator Award. We're also joined by Mr. Ronan Rogers, who's the Senior Director of Research and Development at Medtronic, one of the world's largest medical technology companies and a cornerstone of the Galway region's biomedical and medtech ecosystem. Please give them a huge round of applause. This is an impressive lineup by any measure. You can sit here if you like, Ronan, but then you have to ask the questions. Okay. Might be easier, yeah. You're so welcome again. Thank you for having this chat with us. To start this session, we might talk to Ines and Ronan first because we haven't heard from you yet. Ines, we've had the pleasure of hearing from Ellen and Stéphane earlier about their groundbreaking work. Could you share a bit about your research? In particular, your team has created digital twins, I believe, to better understand infant health during their first year of life. It sounds absolutely fascinating. Could you tell us more about this research, some of the key emerging technologies you used, and maybe give us some of the key insights you've been able to uncover to date?
Absolutely. So thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. We heard a lot about digital twins now, and there were mechanical twins. So the twins we're working on, they are metabolic twins of human as well as microbiome metabolism for that matter. And particularly we're interested in using these metabolic twins to kind of see how we can use nutrition as a mean to remain healthier and become healthier. And the reason for that being is we all eat. We eat sometimes good, we eat less good. There were various choices for lunch today. I like the scampi, so we're probably not the healthiest one. So how would that be if afterwards a computer program or a digital twin personalized to myself could tell me, well, Ines, you didn't do very well now for lunch. Maybe you do a salad for tonight and you're all grand again. And so that's kind of the vision we're working towards in the lab. And this involves a lot of, let's say, biochemistry you may know from textbooks, etc. And so some years ago, we created the first whole body model of a female and a male. We called him Harvey and her Havetter, and they're kind of standardized individuals, but they can be personalized to metabolic diseases or certain diets or genetic profiles. And so we're really trying to understand how we can integrate different omics data, clinical data generated by the research community to drive forward this vision of personalized nutrition in a way that's better than what's done today. And so in that kind of line of work, we got with nutrition, of course, very intrigued by the fact that the microbes in us play a key role. So you can't really talk about nutrition and human health without considering the gut microbiome. And of course, in this country being very important work done in Cork, APC and elsewhere. And so it became natural to us to create metabolic twins for the gut microbiome.
But we're talking about infant health during their first year of life. Right. So how different can it be? It's either breast milk or something quite like it, isn't it? That infants are ingesting for quite a bit at the first year.
So basically now we have the microbes and the human. Mm-hmm. And so the next step was then, through the work, it was really to create babies because we work on inherited metabolic diseases that affect children. And so at the beginning, when the students started the work, we just thought, well, we take the adult model and we just make it smaller, don't calculate the weight. turns out babies are not just small adults. And so we had to adapt quite a bit on not only the nutrition, but also on the metabolism. And that was quite interesting. But now we can ask the question, for example, for children that do not get breast milk, or where the mothers have different, let's say, nutritional background, how beneficial or detrimental can it be for their upbringing? Or what is the impact of certain formulations? And then, of course, in terms of diseases, with inherited metabolic diseases, the few that are tested for and that can be treated are often nutritionally treated. Mm-hmm. And they're very rough kind of dietary treatments. So can we make it better for the infants to grow healthy or remain healthy for a longer period of time? So that's kind of like the newest work we've been doing, and we build the models and the computational tools around it.
I'm sure a lot of people will be waiting with bated breath for the results of your research. I certainly am going to be very interested in that. Ronan, I'm going to come to you. Medtronic, we all know about Medtronic here in Galway. It's a key employer here. It's also a major global player as well. Could you talk us through your role within Medtronic and maybe highlight the technologies and products that are currently being developed at Medtronic without obviously breaking any non-disclosure agreements or anything like that? Take us through what you're working on right now.
Sure, yeah, thanks, Grania. And maybe first, I just want to start with on behalf of maybe all my colleagues in Medtronic to congratulate the college today or the university today in terms of the launch of the Institute. Medtronic has had a long-standing relationship with the university, and in the last year we formalized that through the signing of a signature innovation partnership with the university, and it's certainly something we're very proud of, and certainly today is another very progressive step for the university in terms of the launch of the Institute. If you take a step back, and it was kind of touched on a few times today in terms of Galway and the medtech ecosystem, we are at the epicenter of one of the 5 global medtech hubs, and the university's ambition to be one of the leading medtech universities globally is very much aligned with Medtronic's ambitions. And I think today, the launch of the Institute is very much another manifestation of that ambition. So delighted to be part of today, and certainly congratulations to all involved. I might just quickly introduce Medtronic as well as a company, both globally and in Ireland. So Medtronic is the largest medical device company in the world. There's about 100,000 employees globally, working in over 150 countries around the world. We develop technologies to treat 70 conditions in the human body, and we typically treat, last year for example, we treated about 74 million patients around the globe. So that's about two patients every second. I suppose really we're on a transition, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later on, but as a company we're evolving from a medtech or a medical device company to a health technology company, and that really talks to the convergence that's happening now in terms of with ICT, or the whole information communication technologies. In terms of Medtronic in Ireland, very briefly, Medtronic has about 5,000 employees in Ireland, spread across a number of sites. So two sites here in Galway, one in Merview that was the epicenter during the pandemic, building all our ventilators, very important site for us. We have obviously a very large site in Parkmore, which is where I work. It's about 4,000 people on that site. And then we have sites in Athlone and Dublin. In terms of our Parkmore site, it's probably our biggest and most diverse site. It's a major site for Medtronic globally. So it would be certainly seen as a centre of excellence for manufacturing, a centre of excellence for research and development, which is where I work. But there's also evolving footprint in terms of business services. And also we have a customer innovation centre which hosts about 600 healthcare professionals from all over the globe every year. And certainly it's a very rich environment for those healthcare professionals to work with our engineers, identifying new needs and obviously supporting our innovation process, but also seeing how we make our products as well. In terms of what I do and in terms of what we do in terms of the technology we develop in Galway, I suppose firstly I will say the role I have is certainly it's a role that isn't uncommon in large multinationals. But it's great to be able to do a role like that from Ireland. It's certainly not something that you could probably do 20 years ago. In terms of the role I do, I lead a global product development portfolio for one of our business units. So we have 17 different business units in the company, and my job is leading the product development portfolio for one of those businesses. And there's two parts to the portfolio. Firstly, one of them is the treatment, developing technologies to treat coronary artery disease. It's a mature space, but it's an interesting story in terms of what happened 20 years ago and what's happening now. So 20 years ago, the pharma industry converged with the medtech industry to develop drug-eluting stents for the treatment of coronary artery disease. And that became, and it still is, the largest growth driver in the medtech industry. And, if you look at that as an example, while it's still a mature space, 125 million people around the world have coronary artery disease. 9 million die every year from coronary artery disease, and 4 million typically get some kind of intervention a treatment for that. So it's a really interesting space, and certainly I think that history, certainly potentially will repeat itself going forward. The other area of responsibility I have is for the treatment of hypertension. Hypertension, about 1 billion people around the world right now have hypertension, and it's the number one risk factor for deaths globally because it essentially increases the risk of heart disease, heart failure, stroke, kidney disease, and kidney failure. So it's something that hasn't a device or technology solution right now. There are drugs that people can take, and the drugs work, but unfortunately, people don't take their drugs. I think Ellen alluded to that earlier on with some of her insights. So there is certainly a value proposition to having a technology solution to treat hypertension. So my area of focus there is really around scaling the technology we currently have, commercializing it globally, and that's because industry standards change, things are evolving on a continuous basis, so we have to continue to work to scale that technology. But also we're working on technology evolution, which is really making the technology better and more efficacious. And we're very lucky as well, as part of our partnership with the University of Galway, we are running one of the programs through the local Institute of Clinical Trials, which is, we're starting up a early feasibility clinical trial on a very exciting space for us in the hypertension space. And that's a first for Medtronic, and certainly shows the benefits of, that partnership and that connection. And, there's a lot of eyes on that at Medtronic in terms of that particular program. So overall, I suppose to describe my role, really, I manage a portfolio of projects, and my job is essentially to develop the right products on time and on budget, and really meeting a set of business deliverables. To give you a sense then of the broader kind of technology space in our facility in Galway at the moment, we're developing, I suppose, our key competencies around developing minimally invasive technologies, which essentially are an alternative to a surgical intervention. So therefore, typically, a less invasive procedure allows the patient to recover a lot more quickly. And we're working in a lot of spaces that were just touched on in some of the previous talks. So, for example, we're developing prosthetic heart valves across all the different valves in the heart, the aortic, the mitral, the tricuspid valve, and essentially delivering them through a minimally invasive puncture, typically in the femoral artery or sometimes a venous access, and delivering these large payloads to the heart in a very minimally invasive way. Another really interesting business we have is our pacing business, which is developing ways of pacing the heart, multiple chambers in the heart. So again, a very, very exciting space and growth area. Another area that I think Ellen touched on earlier was atrial fibrillation, a huge area for further technology solutions. And we have a lot of projects in that space in terms of addressing how you disrupt those conductive paths that develop in the heart that create atrial fibrillation. So really this mapping and ablation technology is kind of where the industry is going now in terms of a treatment. We develop technologies, for example, as well to treat peripheral vascular disease, which is, typically happens in the legs and the arms. And also we have, technology that addresses another part of our business, which is addressing fractures in the spine and how to deal with that in terms of a technology solution. And finally, I suppose one of our other really interesting businesses is focused on the respiratory space, but also very interesting on remote patient monitoring. And it's definitely a growth area as well, and an area we're investing heavily in. So it's I suppose we're lucky in one respects as a location in Ireland that we are working on all the high growth areas, which ultimately provides a degree of sustainability and certainty for the future.
Thank you, Ronan, for that. I'm going to now maybe focus a bit on each of your own unique approaches to research and innovation. You're all to the forefront of your fields, each of you leveraging state-of-the-art and emerging technologies as part of your research. So if I come back to you, Ellen, I did notice you were nodding along as Ronan was talking there. It feels like there's a lot of synergy in the areas that you're working in. But could you elaborate on how your approach to research and innovation has contributed to the success you've enjoyed? Were there any key steps in your career that you feel enabled you to integrate such novel technology into your medical device research?
Sure, yeah. I suppose when I graduated from here for undergrad, I started my career in industry. So I worked with Mednova, a company founded here in Galway with some amazing people. And after that with Abbott in California, and then with Medtronic, I had the pleasure of working on Ronan's team. And then when I decided to, pursue a PhD, I had that background of industry and some sense of, how things get translated and all the big effort that goes into it. Starting something in the lab is just the first step and kind of a long journey. So when I went to Harvard, I was really interested in maintaining some of that aspect and working on cardiovascular devices, but I wanted to learn new things in my PhD. And I started learning about robotics and tissue engineering and these fields that were new to me. And I had two very supportive advisors that allowed me to try to kind of merge all of those things into my doctoral work. So I worked on, robotic systems for the heart and drug delivery devices, cell therapy delivery devices, and tried to bring that forward. And then when I started my own lab, kind of continued on that path. So I think it was a combination of my experiences and then the support of mentors and people around me that allowed me to kind of forge this new direction.
But it's a very rounded approach, isn't it? You've got as you said, the technology, med device background, then scientific. So you're able to look at your projects from several different angles at once.
Yeah, I think that really helped me, to kind of start this research program, but also I think involving others. And, we have a lot of clinical collaborators that kind of co-invent and co-create a lot of the technology. So being able to kind of work with them and reach out to them is also very helpful. It's really a team science, as Julia mentioned earlier. Yeah.
Stéphane, I'd like to ask you the same question. How has your own approach to research and innovation contributed to your success? What way do you look at it?
So, when I started my own group, there were kind of two routes that I was considering. So one was more like looking at what are the really important scientific questions in the community at that moment. I remember was a lot about constitutive modeling of soft tissues and so on. So there was a lot to do on that topic. But I didn't really see what would be the applications at short or mid-term. And at the same time, I had the opportunity of working with surgeons which were in very close environments, as I showed in my presentation. And so then I decided more to focus on the questions that the surgeons were asking and to build the problems based on the motivation. And so it was a kind of, something that is driven by the application, a research that is driven by the application. And when I look back, I think that really helped to get recognition and success because then we could end up with having a startup and then having something that is used now by a large number of clinics. So, well, that's the approach, I think, more like of the application-motivated research that I think was important.
Ronan, maybe you can give us an industry perspective here. Medtronic is obviously an industry leader, as we've seen, in the development of medical technologies and operates all over the world. Can you tell us about Medtronic's approach to research and innovation and how it has contributed to its sustained success over the years?
Yeah, sure, Gráinne. I think, at a summary level, I suppose, ultimately we develop and invest in research and innovation in probably three ways. Number one, we do it internally. Number two, we do it through acquisitions and mergers. And number three, we do it through partnerships. But I suppose how we do it and what we do is kind of, I suppose, defined by the landscape. And maybe if you look at the healthcare landscape globally, firstly, I think it was, again, touched on during the course of the day, there's an aging global population, which means there's a chronic disease burden there related to things like cancer, obesity, heart failure, and there aren't, robust technology solutions for those chronic diseases. 60% of all deaths globally annually are related to those three or four areas. And I think, the example I gave earlier on coronary artery disease, talks to another point around access. So there's 125 million people in the world with coronary artery disease. 9 million die every year, 4 get treated. That talks to access and affordability, and that's certainly a responsibility of companies like Medtronic to provide solutions in that space. At a high level, there's 400 million people in the world right now who have no access to any healthcare, which is incredible. So that's really what we have to try and solve as a company. And in terms of healthcare costs, at the moment, globally, I think the cost of healthcare globally is about $8.3 trillion, and that will double it by 2060. So that isn't sustainable because most GDPs of most countries is not increasing at the same pace. So there needs to be technology solutions to that. And AI, for example, is one of the ways that will be solved, I believe, in the future. In terms of Medtronic, then, we're trying to solve those areas around affordability, accessibility, chronic diseases, and obviously the cost of healthcare. In terms of how we make our R&D investments, we try to identify high growth segments within the healthcare market. Typically, 80% of our top line growth is from introducing new products into the market. And then we also have a commitment to the street, in terms of our share price and our shareholders around setting, achieving certain revenue targets, and profitability in the short and medium term, but also having that kind of potential longer term to grow, which obviously drives the share price. So that is a consideration in terms of what we do as well. So those KPIs then kind of inform our R&D investment. And typically, Medtronic last year, I think, generated about $32 billion in revenue and invested about $2.7 billion in research and development, which is about 8.5% of our total revenue. So that would be, an average across the company. There's some high spend areas and there's some much lower spend areas, and that would be typical of a lot of medtech companies. The other thing that's unique about medtech companies is the diverse nature of the portfolios. They're probably not the same as, we'll say, the energy industry or the automotive industry. We have thousands of products, thousands of interfaces with the patient, thousands of applications. So the reality is we're never going to be able to invent everything. So there's a very vibrant medtech startup ecosystem, and Medtronic is very lucky to be in a position to be able to acquire those companies. We are a cash-rich company, and as a result, we are very active in that M&A space. So that is one of the ways we jump quickly into high growth areas by acquiring companies in that space. In terms of our internal development, we do put bets, in terms of early research and technology development. A lot of our spend, though, is on core product development, getting new products to market and, sustaining products in the market. So one of the areas I would say that is an opportunity in terms of partnerships, particularly with academia, is that early stage research, which is 5 years plus, 5 to 7 years plus, that kind of window where I think a lot of multinationals, due to the commercial pressures they're under, fail to invest heavily enough in. So I think that's certainly an opportunity that I would highlight. And I think then, the difference between working in a lot of multinationals and maybe the startup space is, we are very much focused on commercializing products globally. So we have to do a lot of things to scale that technology, ensure the quality is appropriate and that it's reliable and manufacturable. So, we move at a certain pace as a result. And I think there are opportunities, for startups to obviously move faster as a result. So I think that's, kind of a broad sense of how we operate and how we invest in research and innovation.
Thanks, Ronan. I'm going to move into the area of interdisciplinarity now. All of your work has a distinctly interdisciplinary theme to it from both the technology perspective, but also in that many of you work across academic, industry and clinical environments. And I'd like to explore this aspect in the 10 minutes that we have left. So we're going to have to try and move it so that everybody gets in. Ellen, I'm going to come to you first. Your work as a biomedical engineer working closely with clinicians has led to really remarkable innovations in medical technology. We saw you featured on CNN. Could you discuss how this interdisciplinary environment fosters breakthroughs?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it a little bit, but I think for us it's really important to work closely with industry. So, we have sponsored research agreements and collaborators and always working with industry, but also with local hospitals. And I think those three kind of groups coming together can really help to do this interdisciplinary work. It's really necessary, I think. So we like to have attendings or surgeons that are on training years to be in the lab every day and work with the engineers in the lab and work on things together. And I think creating that kind of environment, which, it's really enables a lot of innovations that are clinically needed, but then of course we have to validate that industry would adopt them too. And I think knowing there's a place for academic labs for certain types of work, and there's a place that industry is just much better at doing other work, and recognizing that is important.
It is indeed. Ines, if I could ask you, what approach do you have in engaging with clinicians in the work that you do?
So for the newest work we're doing, which is on the digital babies, we're trying to accelerate the diagnosis of these inherited metabolic diseases. And so in that perspective, we're working with treating clinicians to get the patient's data, to understand how the disease works, but also then how we can use our models, as well as that kind of like clinical phenotypes, if you want, to accelerate the diagnosis. And here one has to understand that currently such a diagnosis can take up to 5 years for a baby to go from doctor to doctor. And it's painful for the child, of course. It can be devastating, but also for the caretakers. So close collaboration to really ensure that we speak the same language and then to make it work for the infants would be fantastic.
Okay, I'm going to move on now and talk about AI and emerging techniques, because Ronan brought it up there, and I think it's something everybody, whether they're in the scientific field or not, is fascinated about. So as we talk about the future and emerging technologies and health-based research, it's impossible not to mention the role of artificial intelligence and machine learning and big data. And Ines, I'm going to start with you again.
Sure.
Can you give us an overview of the potential role for AI and machine learning in your own field of research? Yeah. Is it something that you're already leveraging?
So we started looking at it, probably like everybody else, being curious about ChatGPT, so trying around what can we do. And so particularly with large language models, we're working now. And so the models that we're using, the digital babies, they're deterministic models. So we can't really capture clinical phenotypes. But yet again, for the diagnosis, not only metabolic phenotype, but also the clinical is crucial to accelerate the diagnosis. And so we use large language models and AI in general to bring them closer together and really get to that diagnostic tool, hopefully quicker.
And what do you see as the major challenges when you're integrating AI approaches into either biomedical research or indeed into a clinical setting itself?
So for us, it's data and patient protection. Now I think it's really there and has its reason, etc. But it makes it very difficult for a research laboratory to get enough testing data to validate the models, the predictions we're doing. So for us, it means we have to bring our software to where the data reside. But then there's a challenge, particularly in hospitals as well. There might be not the computer infrastructure. We use proprietary software, etc. So it becomes an additional effort, let's say, to make it work, and extra research is really needed to get a seamless flow of data and tools.
Okay. Stéphane, from your keynote, we saw that you're also working in the computational domain. With this, are AI-based approaches going to have an impact on the tools and modeling approaches that you have developed and are going to be developing?
So I have to say that for longer, I was really more working on mechanistic modeling, okay, and not AI. But then when we wanted to have our models transferred through a company so that they could really help for decision making in the clinics, then there were a number of challenges. That was like the time it takes to solve a mechanistic model. So then we had to resort to AI and machine learning, so that now our models, they can just be built like this.
You had to resort to it so it could happen like that.
It did not. But this was like acquiring the experience and then hiring a number of data scientists, and it was also easier in the company than really in the lab, because also data scientists now, they have a lot of opportunities, and so it's always easier. They can work in a company than in a university. But the experience came with really transferring our models into a framework of decision making, where it needs to be fast, it needs to cost less and less manpower, and then this is how we integrated it in our approaches.
Ronan, can you briefly tell us from an industry perspective how Medtronic is leveraging AI in the development of next generational medical devices?
Sure. Firstly, maybe to state as well, I think, medics will never be replaced by AI. I think, but medics who use AI potentially will replace healthcare professionals who don't. And similarly, in terms of innovation, I think innovation will always be a people-led process, but I think AI helps with efficiency and productivity. So I think it's definitely beneficial in that way. In terms of Medtronic, I suppose we're looking, and we've bullishly kind of embraced AI. And I think, we're talking, and our head of AI is really talking about this fifth revolution in healthcare over the next 2 decades because of that, integration of AI into healthcare. And what that would look like is, customizable healthcare, and very much kind of prediction, prevention, and very much individualized treatment. And we've talked about digital twins already in terms of how that will support that healthcare treatment plan as well. In the interest of time, I'll just cut to the chase in terms of small examples. We have a lot of products right now with embedded AI, and really we're using in our products. It's very much machine learning or deep learning in terms of our products, which we have successfully got approved, with the FDA and other regulatory bodies. One example of that, just briefly, is our GI Genius, which essentially complements an existing technology, which is a pill cam product, which the patient follows. It takes a video of their GI tract and essentially looking for polyps, which obviously have a direct causation and connection to cancer. And a recent clinical trial we ran showed that physicians miss about 50% of those polyps, where they have to sit down, take an hour to review this video, and they get tired, their eyes get tired. And then we compared that to our GI Genius, which is an AI technology that reads the same video. It picked up, almost 100% of the polyps. The AI doesn't get tired, which is obviously an advantage. So a job that takes an hour for a physician to do can be done in 5 minutes, and then obviously the physician will have the final say on that. And I suppose the advantage of that in terms of the healthcare system is huge. For example, emerging economies typically don't have the trained healthcare professionals to support that type of technology in terms of reading the scans or the videos. But obviously using AI allows us to deploy that type of technology in those emerging economies And really, it democratizes healthcare, which obviously is hugely beneficial. To give an example of that particular machine learning, it took 13 million videos to train that particular technology, which obviously it takes time and takes a lot of data. So data is obviously central to all this as well.
I'm going to go around the panel very quickly. It's the last question. I just want a small answer from either of you. Looking ahead, I want each of you, beyond AI and machine learning, to tell us what other emerging technologies we should be paying attention to. Stéphane first. This is not what you kind of look at, really, is it?
No, but I think that what I was showing at the end is also everything related to integrating genomics and their new technologies like spatial transcriptomics. So coupling that very low scales with I mean, more like the biomechanics and tissue scale together in digital twins. I think it's very important. So,
okay,
so that would be my answer.
Okay, Stéphane, thank you. Ellen, what about you?
Yeah, one of the it's not an emerging technology; it's an established one. But with improvements in imaging, it has enabled a lot more device design, a lot more things that weren't previously possible. And we do some work on going from image to kind of physical model, but it has to be really high quality image. So MRI, OCT, these techniques have really enabled new approaches.
Okay, Ines, what do you think?
Well, for us, I guess it will be very interesting. And I think anyway, for many of these digital twin ideas is that we have better connectivity and internet. And I think there's fantastic work being done already, so that your computer, your phone or your smartwatch becomes a computer, almost as powerful and connects to the cloud, running real-time simulations. Those ones you need actually to be proactive, run the closed loop. We've seen so far as an ambition within the research project to then really be predictive, preventive in medicine, for example.
Okay, Ines, thank you. And Ronan, yourself?
Yeah, I think maybe it's a more generic answer, but I think the combination of, the increase in, computing power annually, I think it's doubling. The combination of AI means, I believe, the pace of innovation will exponentially increase over the next decade. And I suppose what that means is the one constant will be changed. And I suppose how you survive in that environment is you need to be nimble, adaptable, and I think, focused on lifelong learning to, continue to upskill, to stay relevant, I think will be important. And I suppose, just to conclude, maybe sometimes predicting the future is challenging. So another way to flip that is, instead of predicting the future, try to create the future is another way of surviving. So
I couldn't think of a better way to end the discussion. Thank you so much, Stéphane, Ellen, Ronan, and Ines. Thank you.